Me saying, hey,
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for those that are just joining us. Apologize for the couple minute delay in getting started. For those of you that are new joining us, this is the Request for Applications RFA Workgroup for the Youth Development Council. Appreciate the folks that have joined us prior to these and the new folks that are joining us today to meet with that. As we get started, I'm going to turn it over to Sally. My name is Paul Sell, Associate Director here at Youth Development Oregon. But as we get ready to do some introductions, if you can go into your name for we're on Zoom today, right? Yeah, in Zoom, and change to let us know who you are. That'll help in facilitation of the conversations throughout. So if you are a YDD staff member or a YDC member, if you could please put YDO in front of your name. You can see most of our staff have those listed in that. If you are joining us as a guest or another stakeholder, please just put GS in front of your name, and that will help us identify who we are calling on as we engage in conversation today. And I believe Melissa's putting that into the chat. And then we can move on to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to Sally for introductions and agenda review.
Thanks, Paul. I'm Sally Deck. I'm a grant manager and program analyst. Mostly I handle the Future Ready grants. And today's agenda, we're going to do some introductions. We'll talk about the structure and the agreements of this work group. We'll do a quick recap of the meetings that we've held up to this point because this is the final meeting in this work group series. We'll talk through the proposals that we have around the Youth Grants Continuum and the RFA processes. We'll do some highlights around proposed changes to the RFA, and then talk a little bit about the review. We'll review our proposed awards and application limits. And again, that's tucked all up in the changes that we've made and the updates we've done to the RFA processes. So go ahead and change your name if you haven't yet. And first, YDO staff and council members will introduce themselves. And so I'm going to call on a staff member, and then if you can just call on the next staff member after we've gone through staff, you can bounce it back to me, and I'll help everyone else make sure they get introduced. And Melissa has put the comment in the chat, so you also can put additional information in the chat, maybe contact information, things of that nature. And then for the introduction, just your name, your organization, and whether or not you have been a grantee in the past, or if there's a pertinent piece of information like that, that would be great for you to share with us. Thank you for advancing the slide. Thank you for knowing that that was there. Jared, you're next on my screen, so I'm going to call on you to introduce yourself.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jared Shaw. I'm a grant manager and workforce analyst here at YDO, and I will pass it to Bill.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Hansel. I am a grant manager and data lead. I'll pass it to Abraham.
Hello, I'm Abraham Magana. I'm a grant manager and operations analyst, and I'll pass it to who hasn't gone yet? Is Molly on the phone?
Hi, thanks, Molly Burns. I am a grant manager and re-engagement analyst here at YDO, and my camera's off today. I'll go ahead and pass it to...
She's muted. I'll jump in there. Thanks, Molly. This is Melissa Gallardo. I'm executive support for YDO. I will pass it to Cord.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Cord Bucher, Deputy Director, and I'll pass it over to Tanisha.
Thank you. Tanisha Bishop here. I am the Youth Grant Administrative Specialist. I'll pass it back to Sally.
Thanks, Tanisha. Thank you, everybody. I'm just going to call on folks as I see them on my screen. If you can turn your camera on and introduce yourself, we love to see folks when we have these meetings. I see Gabrielle on my screen first.
Hi there. She, her pronouns. I work at the Shadow Project. We're based in Portland. And I actually worked with Jared a few years ago on a YDD grant at my last organization, but the Shadow Project, we're just building our capacity for state level granting right now. So excited to hear how things have been evolving.
Excellent. Glad you're here. Meryl Cole.
Hi, thanks so much. I am Meryl. I'm with the Big Yard Foundation. I manage our operations, and we are completely new to youth development, and I'd really like to learn what you have to offer. Just this past summer, we had our first what we call Academy, and it's a 2-week summer program for student athletes from underserved communities. And we provide half a day of STEM learning and half a day of flag football.
Wow, thanks for being here. Scott Cooper.
Yeah, my name is Scott Cooper. I'm the Executive Director from Alternative Youth Activities. We come to you from Coos and Curry County. We are a small youth-based organization that's been around for about 40 years. We gave out 32 tons of food. We're housing over 100 kids, 250 in our educational program, and 100 in our workforce right now. So always love working with this group. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Glad to see you. Tylea, or correct me, please.
You said it absolutely right. Can you all hear me? Okay, perfect. My name is Tylea. I'm the Executive Director of nonprofit Hands That Help PNW. We are a Black social service agency working with the underserved population in Clackamas County. We are a mentorship program, and we work with the North Clackamas School District. We service the kiddos there as far as mentorship and also wraparound services. We are new here, and we're just excited to hear of all of the things you guys are doing. And yeah, we're happy to be here.
Excellent. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Talitha?
Sorry, I'm waiting for the camera to come on. I think I keep clicking it too many times. Oh, there it goes. Hi, everyone. My name is Talitha Mathis. I'm the Assistant Director at Better Chances. We are new to YDO. We have not been a grant recipient from YDO. We have a youth mentorship and basketball program. We work with the minorities, BIPOC, underserved youth in the communities of Northeast Portland, North Portland, Southeast Portland. Some come out from East Gresham as well. We are a new organization as well, but we've been doing the work for a little over close to 2 years now, 2 years coming up in the spring of 2025. And I'm glad to be here and hopeful and ready to apply for the grant when it does open.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. Lori Wick. Looks like you're still, there you go.
Sorry. Good day, everybody. So I'm with Douglas Education School District, and we are contracted to provide education program for the juvenile hall here in Douglas County Juvenile Department. And I'm new to this group, so I'm here just to observe and learn and see what's happening.
Glad to have you. Destiny.
Sorry, my computer is delayed. Hi, everyone. My name is Destiny. I'm with Impact Northwest. I'm the Youth and Family Assistant Director. We are currently recipients or awardees of this current year's grants for YDO. We specifically are programs that are funded through YDO this year are with our workforce development for our high school program and our manufacturing pre-apprenticeship, as well as our STEM programs from in the elementary, middle school. And yeah, I'm really excited to kind of learn more about the changes that, I've been part of this work group, and kind of as we're rolling into the next stages of application, I'm really excited to just kind of see what that looks like.
Great, thank you. Glad you're here. Shayla.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I am with Better Chances alongside of Talitha Mathis. I am the funding coordinator for that program, and we are here to learn more about the YDO RFA process in anticipation to apply for funding to enhance and expand our program, which, as Talitha mentioned, is geared towards positive youth development, pro-social enrichment, and mentorship. So thanks so much for allowing us to be here today.
Great, so glad you're here. Susan Scarlett.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Susan Scarlett. I'm Executive Director for Big Yard Foundation. I think Meryl already introduced and talked a little bit about our foundation. So I'm not going to repeat what I'm sure she already said, but I'm happy to be here to learn more about how we can get money from Youth Development Oregon. So thank you for having us.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone I missed? The names all kind of jump around when we turn our cameras on and off. If I missed anybody, or if anybody joins in a moment, we will make sure to include them. There are a bunch of new people on this call, and we're delighted about that. If you don't mind just dropping in the chat how you learned about this work group and specifically this session, I would love to know. And when we get a little deeper into the slide deck, we'll get you the links for the previous sessions if you want to go back and watch any of the pieces like just in greater detail, because today is going to be quite a bit of an overview of what we have done so far. Thanks, Melissa. I love that you put all that stuff in the chat. Thank you. And then let's go ahead and bump to the next slide. So the structure of this work group is that we have designed it so that council, the Youth Development Council, and stakeholders, including our grantees, community members, potential grantees, have an opportunity to learn about and have conversation around the components of the RFA and the processes that we are obligated to follow, as well as processes that have been flexible and thus have evolved and improved over time. This is a non-binding dialogue and is intended to create additional transparency and conversation for us to collect feedback and input from those who are affected by the funding, as well as those who are affected maybe by the process, the timing, when our RFAs roll out, and some of those other details that can be really important to how the folks we fund are able to be successful in the work that you all do. Let's go to the next slide. So we have a handful of agreements. I think all of these will be easy and make sense. We keep the discussion and the sharing to the current agenda topic item. Like I said, we have prior sessions that have all been recorded, as well as the slide decks are all available, and so you can skim through those materials at your leisure. We have a 2025 to 2027 RFA continuous improvement document of sorts that we are using to guide these conversations, as well as our equity lens. We give priority to the members of Youth Development Council to ensure that their voices are heard. And we are also able to utilize the chat functions so that folks can share additional information, be in conversation in the chat. It's great when we get to see partnerships form among those who are connected through YDO. Also, feel free to use the raise hand features, things like that. Please stay muted until you're called on. That's just to keep it quiet in the Zoom room. And we stay committed to the allotted timing so that we can promise you that we will be done on time. Any questions on that? And then I also see that Bethany has joined us. Bethany, if you just want to turn your camera on for a moment, introduce yourself and say hi, that'd be great.
Sally. I am Bethany Tramer. I'm the director for the Oregon Alliance of Boys and Girls Clubs, and just here as a community member to listen in. Thanks.
Great. We're glad you're here. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we'll drop these links in the chat, but then these links are also embedded in all of our slide decks. And so you'll see at the top that there's a link to the YouTube videos and then a separate link to the published folder that has all of our agendas and the slide decks. So you can see on this slide that we have had 8 meetings prior to this one. And then in each of those that we worked through a number of different elements of the RFA process. And so at the beginning, we were setting some ground rules. And then you can see that we went through the details of our re-engagement grant, and then our community investment grant, and then the workforce grant. The workforce grant is one that is changing pretty dramatically from 2023-25 to the next biennium. And that is because currently the current biennium is funded with federal dollars that are expiring at the end of this biennium. And so there will be a new RFA that will have some new requirements. And so there's a little bit of additional information on that. We also talked in depth about the rubric. And so the evaluation rubric so that folks know how they will be scored and also how evaluators will be trained to evaluate the application materials. So there are specific elements that get evaluated and then scored. And then there are other elements of the application that are not scored. For instance, your legal name, the information about your board. Those elements aren't scored. And so then we have specific training for the evaluators so that they know how to score the critical parts of your application. We had an entire session about that. We also talked about award ranges. That's another thing that is changing a little bit, and we'll go into some more detail about that today, as well as the appeals process. We have a methodology called that we refer to as regional awards. We use a regional solutions map, and that is how we do our best to ensure that areas across the state that apply for funds are able to have funds distributed. And then we also talked quite a bit about the data that we collect about the participants who are served with these funds. And so we'll have a little bit of an overview there, but if you want to go back into the prior materials, you'll be able to see that on October 11th was when we talked about data, and you can get some more details on that. Any questions? All right, Paul, I will pass it to you, I believe, for the next slide.
Sounds good. Can you guys hear me? No? Yes? Okay, perfect. And Melissa and Sally, I just lost chat for some reason. I cannot find it anywhere on my screen. So if someone does chat a question, please interrupt me and let me know that it's there. I will keep working once I'm done presenting. So this slide is really to highlight what we call the Youth Grants Continuum. In a couple of slides, we'll go into a little bit more in depth of what those definitions are. But you can see that as part of our Youth Grants Continuum, which is essentially our competitive grants across the agency, we have 3 large RFA types, or request for application types. One of them is called the Re-engagement Opportunity Grant that primarily serves ages 14 through, or that serves ages 14 through 24, and it's focused on youth reconnection to education. One of the other large grants we have is what we call the Job and Work Readiness. That is our kind of new grant around workforce development and the workforce initiative that we've had in the past. That primarily serves ages 16 through 24, and that is a focused on youth connection to workforce. And those 2 grants are very specific in terms of the connection to re-engagement and workforce convenience, which is a part of the requirement of that, as well as one of our smaller grants that help host those events across the state. The other 2 kind of pools of money or grants that we have is what we call our community investments. And that has changed in the sense that we've heard that name a lot, but it typically has had initiatives broken down inside those grants. This is just going to be very focused on positive youth development programming with a primary age range of 6 through 19. And there's some changes within that piece. And the reason we're using words around primarily serves, there are some exceptions that you'll be able to serve youth outside of that. Another change that you will see is one of our initiatives under that old community investment grant model was our youth violence and gang prevention grants. And we are purposely putting those on in their own request for application process. And that's going to primarily serve ages 16 through 24. We're doing that to add clarity to the processes. And that's going to be some very specific youth violence and gang prevention programming, which will be defined further in that RFA as we go through it. But each of our RFAs or requests for applications will be part of this Youth Grants Continuum that you'll see roll out. Primarily, this presentation is focused on those first 3 large RFA types, because those will be the first 3 that are coming out in terms of the timeline around that work. So I'm going to hit pause there because it's kind of a big slide. If people have questions or whatnot. And again, I'm trying to get chat back, but I have no idea why. But I probably shouldn't sign off to try to re-sign back in. So, oh, hey, it did come back. There we go. So feel free to use chat or reactions within that. We do have quite a few folks on the call, so if we don't notice your hand raised, please do put it in chat, and we'll hit pause. So this next slide is is really focused around the proposed RFA process. And as Sally alluded to earlier, is we've focused this work on continuous improvement model and kind of 4 large areas. So we've set this slide up to be similar around breaking the RFA process into 4 kind of large areas. We have the RFA framework, which is going to include all the information leading up to and including the release of the published RFA materials at that time. And so the work group is part of that, the continuum. You'll learn more about what community engagement around this work looks like in some coming slides. Then the application items is really the required portions from an applicant or who's applying for this. And so you'll have to provide organizational information. You'll have to respond to some evaluation criteria and letters of support. That's all detailed elements in the RFA. This work today is really going to focus on those last 2 sections, which is around the evaluation process. And kind of what that looks like in terms of the scoring rubric and how all of that happens behind the scenes once you've applied, and then the awarding process when we move to intent to award and the appeals process primarily in this presentation. But all 4 of those elements is basically where we start from and end up in with successful applicants receiving grant funds and moving into grant reporting. All right, so if we go to the next slide, this is a purposeful slide to hit pause. There's a lot of information in this slide, so we're trying to break it up in chunks. So we'll just kind of ask if anybody has questions or comments around the RFA framework, the application items, so those kind of bolded areas that we highlighted prior. All right. So Sally, I think I turn it over to you next. Yes.
Oh, indeed. I get the next slide.
All right.
All right. Everybody get out your reading glasses because there's a lot of text on the slide. And again, know that you don't have to memorize what's on the slide right now or screenshot it or anything. You'll have access to this as soon as we wrap up and add it to the folder. So, but a handful of definitions that we want to ensure everyone has an understanding of, that when we talk about the youth grants portfolio, we are talking about the YDO, Youth Development Oregon, competitive grant funds. And so that includes community investment grants, the re-engagement grants. The re-engagement collaborative is a grant that is responsible for bringing convenings together of various grantees. It includes a handful of other grants, including some federally funded grants. And then in the event that the legislative session creates legislation around additional grants or additional funding, that would all be pooled into what we refer to as our youth grants portfolio. Couple quick notes about applicants and applications. So an applicant is the person or persons on behalf of an organization. So sometimes it is just a person and sometimes it is an organization that is applying for funding. And that in our mind, if organizations share an executive director or share a board, then they count as one organization. When we talk about the application, we're referring to the materials that are included in that. When we talk about returning YDO awardees or returning YDO grantees, we are looking at grantees who are funded right now or who were funded in the previous biennium, and that they've remained in good standing with YDO and ODE. We include ODE in there because there are budgetary complications. We are attached to ODE in some ways, and so we ask that you do right by ODE and by us. We also recognize that we have applicants or awardees who are either brand new, have never received funding from us, or have not received funding from us recently, in which case we have some new ways of doing things around reporting, et cetera. And so those organizations would all be considered new to YDO applicants and then potentially new to YDO awardees. We also have a distinction that we make when we talk about programming. And this is so that we can be as supportive as needed of new programming versus programming that is currently running and operational. And so if something is currently operating and youth are currently being served, then that would be considered a current operational program. If the funding is required in order to start a program, then that would be what we call new programming. So the services are still being designed and will be implemented once awarded, and that there is some future projection there. And that one of the things that we like to do is to have a great grasp on when we can expect data reports that include youth being served. So if we know that it's a new program, then we know it will take some time for you to hire staff, recruit youth, and begin services. And also we know that if you have current programming, you've got youth who are being served right now, and you are up and running and ready to submit for reimbursements in the first quarter and supply data with the participants' information, which gets us to full participant data. We are clarifying the data that we collect so that it is uniform across nearly all of our grants. And that includes then participant name and date of birth, gender, race, ethnicity, and other personally identifiable information. So this is a change for some of our grants, and it remains the same for others. And so we're creating some uniformity there with the intention of it being easier on grantees so that all grantees know what data they need to be collecting, and then also will improve the storytelling and the data reporting that we do, where we show off the good work that our grantees have accomplished, and that is easier for us to do when we have cleaner data. And so for us to have this additional data does improve then the storytelling we're able to do, and so we look forward to that. Last definition, when we talk about RFA type, it gets a little tricky because Future Ready is sunsetting. So we're talking about the specific type of RFA that someone has been funded in. So if an organization has been funded in re-engagement, then they would be considered a returning YDO within re-engagement. But if they start a new program for which they've not been funded before, then that would be in a different RFA type. It would be new to that RFA type. When we talk about RFA type, we're going to talk about workforce development, so that programs that are currently funded with Future Ready or with the workforce, I just totally blanked on the name of our workforce development grants. They're within CI. If you are currently funded with a workforce grant, then you would be considered a returning YDO grantee in the next workforce development grant that we will be rolling out for 25-27. I just said a lot that was probably a little thick. Can I answer any questions on that?
I do.
Please, yes.
If the new programming is like a program that's established somewhere else that they're being like, oh yeah, we can pick this up and do it, is that does that count as like new program? It won't have as much rolling up of implementation. It'll just be like new to this site.
Yeah, so a new site would be considered new programming. And really what we're aiming for is to create runway for you to hire the new staff and recruit youth to the new site.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
Sally, this is Melissa. This isn't a question, but we've had another guest join us.
Great.
Claudia Cediso. I can't see your last name. Claudia Cedeno.
Yes, hi, it's Claudia Sereno. I'm with Impact Northwest. We're a current grantee with the Future Ready and re-engagement grant.
Excellent, thank you. We are glad you're here.
Hey, Sally, I have a question that might also help to sort of address like kind of the complexity of the new versus continuing programs. And that's that, as I understand it, we'll probably provide some tools when our applications come out that folks will be able to kind of look at, and it says, okay, like if you are applying for this grant and you had X grant, then you can apply at this level. If you've not had one of these grants, you should apply at this level. So I think you've kind of talked through like some of these things, but there will be like guiding tools to help folks know where they should apply and what level they can apply for. Because that's my understanding. So I feel like that's probably for folks that are like, okay, what you don't need to know it right now, and we'll try to, I think, assist you in figuring that out. And I think the key thing to understand is that, um, that ultimately for the maximum funding level, that is really, I think, going to be focused on programs that have demonstrated success in that same grant in the previous biennium and the one that preceded it. So 2019, the 21, and 2021 through, wait, what? No, sorry, 21 through 23 and 23 through 25. So the biennium we are in and the one that preceded this one, if you've had that grant, then you can apply at the maximum level, but there will be some other things to kind of help you figure out where you can, what level to apply at. Is that all track? Yeah. Because I myself have trouble remembering it. So there you go.
And that if you had a grant that was only for part of the biennium, because Future Ready was not 2021 through 2023 in its first round, you also qualify as returning, even if you are not funded in this biennium. So, other comments, clarifications? And if not, Paul, I think I'm going to pass it back to you.
I think you had those. I think.
Oh, excellent. Keep going.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa. One of the things that we realized is that staggering the release of the RFAs is gentler on everyone. ODE procurement has a single point of contact, and that single point of contact it is important that we are in relationship with ODE's procurement so that these processes can be as smooth as possible. What that means is that instead of the RFAs all being released at the same time, as we did in 2023, they will be staggered, beginning with the Re-engagement Opportunity Grant, listed here as ROG. Re-engagement Opportunity Grant will be released first. It is the one that has the fewest changes and updates. It will be released in late winter or early spring. About 3 weeks later, we will release the Community Investment RFA. And then following both of those, and dependent on the legislative process, the Job and Work Readiness Grant RFA will be released. And that's the one that is in place of Future Ready and the other workforce readiness grants that we've had. And then the youth violence and gang prevention release is not yet been determined. It will follow after the other three, and we'll speak to some details about that one a little bit later today. For each RFA, the application window will be about 60 days, and then we will be able to begin the intent to awards in mid to late summer for the first grants. So what this means is if you have multiple programs, you will go through the RFA process and apply for one grant, and then apply for potentially a different grant weeks later. And you are unlikely to know whether or not you have been awarded the first grant when the window opens to apply for a different grant. And we'll talk through kind of the order of the awards a little bit later. But the intention is that the release of the RFAs will be timed to make it smoother for everybody involved, and to allow procurement to be more responsive to folks' questions. Paul, is there anything we need to add to that? All right. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Let's go ahead to the next slide. In response to feedback that we heard, we have chosen to limit the number of applications that each applicant can submit. So this is where it matters that an applicant is an organization or a collection of organizations that share an executive director or board. Each applicant can submit up to 2 applications in community investments, up to 1 in re-engagement, and just 1 in job and work readiness. And each application will provide the services will be for a single program in a single location, or different programs in a single location, or the same programming for youth in different geographic service areas. So you do not have to have an application. If you had a program that ran at 4 different schools, all in an area. Let's say you had 4 schools in Portland and you served all of those schools. All of those programs could be included in a single application, because that would be that it's the same programming for youth in different areas and that they could be combined into a single application. You don't need to do separate ones. Any questions on that? Or any what ifs? Or Bethany, I love when you come off. I love it. You have great questions, Bethany. Like, I appreciate every time you ask a question, it clarifies it for everybody.
If you do want to run different applications for the same program at different sites, like, oh, 200,000 would only really fund 2 of our sites. So we will want to put in 2 applications that's for the same program, but at these 2 and then 1 for these 2. That's still allowed, but that's the reason for limiting, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and we'll get to so we have a new cap on the total amount of dollars that can be awarded. And so our intention is that folks can apply for as much as possible within each of their applications. So again, if the example is that you're serving youth at 4 different high schools, you absolutely could break that up into 2 separate applications, and that one of your applications would cover 2 schools and the other application would cover the other 2 schools. That is absolutely allowable. What is not allowable is for you to have 4 different applications that are running the same programming just at 4 different locations, because that would be too many. You are allowed to have 2 for community investment, 1 re-engagement, and 1 job and work readiness.
And to add to that, during application, the applicant will define the service area or the proposed service area. So in Sally's example, if it was the east side and west side, just to simplify the example, those could be your geographic service areas that you define in your grant. So it would have to be that. You would do that as an applicant, choosing how you want to apply accordingly. Good question. All right.
All right. I think
we're kind of pausing. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're adding a bunch of pauses. The next slide, I think, is maybe extraneous. Does anybody have any questions? Hearing none, we'll keep rolling.
Fair enough. So thanks, Sally. So we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Again, there's a ton of information that we're presenting here. This will also be a very similar presentation at our Youth Development Council meeting, because on December 12th, our council does approve this process. And so it'll be a similar information session, but we wanted to provide this as part of the work group information as we go through. So, and I don't know if Melissa yet has put the PDF of this presentation in the chat, but that'll also be available for you to go back and revisit. So this next slide is around the evaluation process. And so obviously we have made some updates and successful updates to that evaluation process. A couple key differences is that evaluators in this new process are independent. Excuse me, I'm getting all choked up apparently about evaluation. Evaluators are independent reviewers of individual applications. And in the past, we've assigned that to groups of teams and blocks of applications going to it. All applications will now be assigned randomly to evaluators with at least 8 or around 8 or more applications, and at least 3 evaluators for each application. And so what that allows us to do, I'm going to hit pause. Sally, you want to take the slide, because I don't think I can talk very well.
Our goal, I don't know if I can follow Paul's, and I don't know that I can make this very seamless. Our goal is that evaluators will have the opportunity to see a variety of applications, and that at least 3 evaluators will score each application. Evaluator pools will be assigned to each RFA, and that's to create some randomness. So you will be invited at the time of application to also volunteer to be an evaluator. You will be placed into an evaluator pool that is not the RFA you are applying within. So if you have job and workforce readiness programming, but you don't have any re-engagement programming, you would then be eligible to be in the evaluator pool for the re-engagement grant reviews. And so the pools are going to be assigned to each RFA. You absolutely can have folks, you will find community members who volunteer to be in each of the pools because they don't have a conflict of interest in any of them. And then that pool allows for an application to be reassigned as needed. And that can be when someone gets in and they see that they do have a conflict of interest, and that they're unable to evaluate, and then that application gets kicked back to the pool and gets reassigned to someone else who is available to review it. And in the past, we had tabulation meetings. We will not have those this time because there will not be teams of evaluators assigned to the applications, but each application will have at least 3 evaluators score it. And then those are the scores that we use to then compile the total scores. All right, Paul, are you back in business? Did I miss anything?
I think so. I think my voice is a little bit back to normal. So yeah, Sally, thank you for covering that. And I think that kind of leads us right into this next slide, which we'll pause right after for questions, is those evaluators will use the rubric. And we've made some significant updates to the rubric that will be published. The whole rubric will be published as part of the request for application, but it'll now use a 10-point rubric divided into 5 response categories. And you can see an example of what that looks like down there. And essentially what this is allowing our volunteer reviewers to do is to evaluate each individual response of an evaluation item in the application itself. And so that's a key distinction to really note, especially if you're applying for this work, is that your response for each evaluation item is graded independently outside of your entire application. And so the rubric will really be designed around that. There'll be some very specific reviewer training, which will include some commonly asked questions and definitions. So you saw a few of those definitions as we began this presentation today, but they'll have all of the information that you were provided as an applicant in regards to that. And then we're also new to this proposed updates is we're encouraging and we're requiring evaluator feedback for questions to provide information back to applicants, which you'll see that connects later in that we're establishing a process for people to receive feedback, whether they're successful or not within the application in the RFA process in general. And so we'll cover that a little bit in more depth here in just a few minutes. But I'll hit pause for a second to see if people have questions around it. You can kind of see the general outline of it. Again, the rubric is published as part of the request for application release. And so you would have all the information that reviewers would see in terms of review and scoring at time of application. Questions? It's not the exciting part, it's the important part about evaluations, right?
The other thing that I'm realizing we should have added to the slide is that the rubric is the same for each evaluation question. There isn't a rubric that is specific to a question. And so the rubric, and that's where you can see here that it is this generic of that the response provides thorough and complete information, addresses all bulleted items. And so each evaluation item will have subsections, and then reviewers will evaluate that question using the same rubric for each evaluation item.
As well as the same rubric across all RFAs. So it's the same rubric across all of these application systems. Other questions or things I forgot? All right. We're rolling right through. So this slide 16, you can see at the bottom with some of the arrows, we're moving now more towards what would be the intent to award process in the RFA process overall. And this is some new definitions as well as some new outlines of how applicants can apply. This does apply across all of our 3 large RFAs in terms of the definitions as well as the amounts that are outlined here. So I'm going to take a few minutes just to kind of walk through this, and then we definitely do want to pause because I think there's some important distinctions in these proposed changes. So when we look at awards that are focused, that offer current operational programming and collect full participant data. So that goes back to those definitions of at time of application, If one of us went into your organization, we could see the programming serving youth. That would be current operational programming, and then full participant data, which does include name and date of birth, and so you have some sort of intake process within that. If you are a returning YDO awardee, and I'm going to just start there, so I'm jumping around in bullets a little bit. But if you're a returning YDO awardee in that same RFA type, you would be eligible to receive up to $300,000 per award, and that's the top cap. That's the most amount of award funding that we offer, and we do that because you've obviously demonstrated that you've currently been providing that programming, as well as that you understand the majority of the reporting requirements and the parts of that RFA type, because you've been previously funded in that and are in good status with us. If you are a returning YDO grantee and you are applying in a new RFA type, so going back to Sally's example, if you're a re-engagement opportunity grantee in the 2023-25 biennium, but you wanted to move over and start providing some community investment grants or some funding within that, you would be limited at the $200,000 mark because you had not served in that RFA type for that one. Again, lots of examples that we'll move through. We will provide quite a bit of detail in the posted and published application materials and RFA materials around that as we move forward. Plus, it will also be something that can easily be clarified as we move forward in the process. For those that are new to YDO, and you can notice that the interchangeable terms of awardee, so at point of intent to award, you become an awardee because you've gone through the evaluation process. You can receive up to $200,000 per award in any of those RFA processes on that. For programming that is new, startup, or is more of that system level work or other programming that just can't collect full participant data, you can notice that for all awards, that's limited and capped at $150,000 per award. And it's really intended to make sure that we are providing the most direct services to youth through current programming, but also allowing opportunities for folks to start up and get things going with some awards that are critical to that success of that work. And then in addition to those individual award caps, there is a new applicant limit of $600,000 total awards across the 3 large RFAs. And so that's community investments, re-engagement opportunity, and job and workforce readiness grants. And there's a very specific distinction on that, because you saw in the youth grants portfolio, there are some other RFAs that are anticipated to come. Those will have some different limitations under the same kind of categories, and it will be further defined in the RFA. But the 3 large RFA processes would have a cap at $600,000 per applicant or organization in that award. So I'm going to hit pause there for a second, see if people have questions. I saw some head nods and so I think that it seems like people are seeing how this is laid out, but definitely want to see if people have questions or clarifications. All right. Well, we'll move to the next one. This next slide is something that, if you've applied for our grants in the past, is something that you probably have seen. You may have been a recipient of these regional awards. This is part of the intent to award process as well. But the regional awards is that they will be limited to 1 possible regional award in each of the 11 regions. And you can see that defined. It's done through the regional solutions map. This is a live link to a colored map that's easier to read with the counties to find in that. When you get this PDF, this presentation, but it's that we'll issue 1 regional award for each of the 11 regions in all 3 of the RFAs. So the community investment, re-engagement opportunity, and the jobs and work readiness grants. And so there's, as an organization or as an applicant, you would only be able to receive 1 of those regional awards across all 3 of those systems within that. And that's been pretty consistent within it. Some of the changes that we're proposing in this is that we're reducing it back to 1 award in community investments, because we are seeing less funds. We're anticipating less funds in that overall grant as we move into the new biennium within that. And then also there'll be a application must meet an agency established minimum score, which we published in the RFA. That is being researched on where that kind of cap is. So just note that if you are applying and you have below that minimum score, that regional award may not be awarded to you based on that definition in the RFA. So questions on the regional award process? And in the awarding process, the regional awards are awarded first. The highest score in the region are typically those first awarded in the scoring and the awarding process, and then it moves to statewide ranking on that. That's not included in this, but that would be detail that's in the RFA. Question. All right. So this final slide around the RFA process is what's called the appeal window. This is a process that all of our RFAs do include, where applicants can appeal the process of awarding. And so grounds for appeal will be further defined in the RFA, but they are definitely focused on an application. Well, in order to submit an appeal, an application must have been reviewed by evaluators. And what that means is if an application did not meet the minimum qualifications, that's handled in a prior process. So, for example, if you were not a licensed business to do business here in Oregon, that would put you as an ineligible applicant for that, and minimum qualifications would not be met in that. And then also the appeals can only pertain to the RFA processes and not an evaluator score. An evaluator score is individualized in terms of based on that rubric. So that is not an appealable piece of that. We recognize that you may not like your score, but that is not a piece that you can evaluate process. But you can appeal if you feel like the agency or ODE did something incorrect as outlined within the RFA processes. And new to this process will actually be an RFA appeal form. It used to be an email that was sent in. This will be a generated form and a link that if you were choosing to appeal as an applicant, that you will fill out and be completed. And it will also be shared when the intent to award notifications go out. And just a kind of a note on intent to award notifications. Intent to award is once the evaluation and scoring has been completed, an email goes out to all applicants that were reviewed, listing the applications that are intended to be awarded and the ones that were not successful in that process. And so a link would be included if you were choosing to appeal at that time. A score and rank will also be released within the intent to award notification, so applicants will know where they ranked in terms of the overall score of each RFA in that process. And then, well, actually, I'm going to pause there for the appeal process to see if people have questions, and I'll talk a little bit about that number 4 item there. Any questions about the appeal process, or if I missed some sections of that from the team that have been working on that? All right, so we can come back to it, but also
Paul?
just kind of, sorry, Cord, go ahead.
Well, I just think a distinction that, because we were checking in with procurement about this. We worked closely with procurement on the appeal process, and should give credit to Molly and Abraham, because they've done most of that work. But we were talking with procurement, and they brought up the minimum qualification piece. And I think the critical thing is that if, for example, we say you're not licensed to do business in Oregon, so you're disqualified, and you're like, but I am, like, I have, here's my number, like I must have gotten put in wrong, I don't know why it's not showing up, etc. You have to contact us like right away. Then what this appeals process is saying is you can't come back 3 months later and say, I never got reviewed because I got disqualified, and that shouldn't have happened. That what we're saying is that the appeal process strictly addresses applications that have come in. So if there is something related to a minimum qualification that you feel certain there is an error made, because I mean, theoretically that could happen, that there I think there'll be a distinction where it says you need to contact someone within like 3 days or 7 days of that. You can't wait 3 months. And that's why we've made that distinction. So we don't want to have someone come and say you made a mistake before you even reviewed the grants, and then you haven't been reviewed and everyone else has. That would create a major problem. So that's really why there's a distinction where appeal is only for grants that have been reviewed and have sort of been through the whole process, since that otherwise would create a real challenge if it were something earlier. So that, I mean, I kind of understood that, and I think, Paul, you were in that conversation, but that distinction was really helpful for me, because that's what we don't want to fix that problem. We cannot fix that problem 3 to 5 months down the road. But it is something that there may be a way for you to contact us or contact the single point of contact if there is a mistake made in terms of determining that you were disqualified, but you have information that indicates that's incorrect. Is that?
Thank you.
I felt like that was just something worth distinguishing.
It is.
Because we do want to make sure we do the right thing all the way through, but we just have to be smart about where we address those issues.
And that point of clarification, I think, is really important, because if you are new to applying in this process, or even if you've been to this process, when you submit an application, that contact email is a critical piece of where you'll receive this information. So, to Court's point, if your application was disqualified during minimum qualifications, an email will go out that indicates that you have been disqualified. So those emails need to be monitored. And so sometimes the applicant, sometimes you have to list the executive director who may not be monitoring that level of information coming in. And so you want to make sure that that contact information is up to date within that work, and recognizing that changes do happen at times. And so that would be your single point of contact in terms of that. And I think that's just an important note in any of these application processes to be aware of. So thank you, Court, on that. Separate from the appeal process, we learned this last go around that it really is critical, and I think it's a value of our agency, that we want to provide feedback to applicants around the process of their application. And so there will be a YDO will create an application feedback request form. So that you notice a lot of this stuff is going electronic, because with single points of contact and the amount of information that we are receiving, we are shifting it to more of a form based, so that it's not reliant on email in that process. And so there will be an application feedback request form that an organization or applicant could submit to do a follow-up process around what were the scores, what were the comments that the reviewers provided. We want to be very transparent in that process. We have offered that across the time, but this will be something that will be actually very detailed in how to access that versus just an email requesting it. So, which I think is a really positive update and a focus of what our agency really wants to do to provide transparency in this work. Questions on that? I like that we put question slides that we paused after every slide. So questions. People are being really quiet about that one on it.
Paul,
so we can come back to it, but sorry, go ahead.
Just to emphasize that you don't have to appeal to get feedback. That's the critical thing that we're trying to distinguish there, because folks have sometimes felt like they needed to submit an appeal in order to get their scores or to get information. And we want to make it really clear that an appeal is really specifically like you have failed to follow this process you set out in the RFA. And there was a way to address that, but there will be a separate way for you to say, I just want my scores. I want to know what the comments were. Even if you're funded and you want that, you will be able to submit a separate request for that. So just like that distinction, like to make it very simple for you to know where to go to get that info, and just also that it can take some time. So we want to capture everyone who wants it. And then as we're able to, we'll share that. So I figured I would just chime in with that.
No, I think it's really important.
I also, piggybacking on that, we have gotten really positive feedback from applicants who applied the first time, weren't awarded, got the feedback, were able to apply that feedback and be awarded the following year. So I really encourage folks to attend our information sessions that will happen prior to the actual RFA release. So what you're hearing today is what we are proposing, but is not yet confirmed by the council. Once it's confirmed by the council, we then write up the actual details of the RFA, and we will have information sessions where people will be able to ask questions about process. They'll be able to clarify the details of like, wait, you need my Secretary of State business number, or you need my Oregon State something else. We go through all of that information in the information sessions that will happen prior to the release of the RFA. Once the RFA is released, we aren't allowed to answer any questions. Only that single point of contact in procurement can answer questions. But just know that until the RFA is released, we are able to answer questions. And we are enthusiastic about offering this information and this support. So if you haven't yet signed up to get our emails, know that we're going to pop that in here somewhere. To be informed about when those info sessions will happen, because everything that we have said in these work group conversations are part of this non-binding dialogue soon we will have our T's crossed and our I's dotted, and we will also be available if you have additional questions, because what we have delivered today, particularly for those of you who are new to YDO, is probably like drinking from a fire hose. And we are very enthusiastic about welcoming applications from new grantees, and want to be sure that you have access to all the information you need to put forward your best possible application.
Thank you, Sally. And which leads really well into Talitha's, I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly, question in chat. Her question is, what policies and procedures does YDO have in place to ensure evaluation process is equitable and inclusive? So part of what you're seeing is the kind of highlights of what will be defined in the RFA. So the request for application is the driving factor and rules around how evaluation works. And so we're very transparent, and it's that, like Sally said, it's binding in terms of what that process is and published in the RFA. So that is kind of the first level of work within that. And then we also use volunteer reviewers across the work. I see Cord is putting some things in chat as well. So all of our evaluations are done through volunteer reviewers. And so we put an all call out. And this last biennium, which I think is a great opportunity, is we can allow for applicants in other RFA types to be part of our reviewing piece. So we want as broad of reviewer pool as we can, from direct service providers to organizations across the state. And so we put out an all call to everybody that's interested in helping in that review process, and then assign it accordingly along those lines. And then, like I said, it's really focused on what is stated in the RFA of that process, so everybody sees where that site is, where it is clear in terms of what the process will look like. And so that reviewer training is a critical element of that work. We're going to spend quite a bit more time this go around in focusing on what a reviewer training looks like, how we are having evaluators evaluate each individual response versus that collective application review in terms of that use of the rubric on it. And so we want it to be very equitable and inclusive within the rules that we are allowed to do in these application processes, for sure. So I'm going to pause because I also want to see if Cord, if you want to add a few more little comments to what you're talking about in chat, or Sally or other team members have questions or thoughts.
Melissa and I just did that thing where we brain meld. So she just put in the chat a link to the YDO Equity Lens Toolkit. And I put a link to our webpage that has our mission, vision, and values, and our equity statement. Yeah. Any other questions?
I want to make sure that we addressed it to the point that you wanted to too. So I see you came online.
Yeah, yes, you did. I dropped in the chat. Thank you for answering my questions and sharing those links. I clicked on them because I just to save them onto my computer. But my other question is you know how like when you're in these meetings and there's a chat, is there any way to like forward the chat to something else so you have all that stuff, so you're not having like copy and paste outside of it, or once the meeting's gone, the chat just disappears?
Melissa,
that is not, yeah.
There were a couple
Melissa.
other things in them I did the same thing to, like open them up in my web browser. But I was just wondering, is there some other way to save this stuff?
I think we can put the chat in the published work group folder.
Okay.
Try.
Yeah, I just skimmed through the chat. The links that we dropped in the chat, so the published work group documents and the link to our videos, are in. Those are, if you have the link, if you clicked it here, then you can get to the rest of them. And this is a little bit of like some circular reasoning, and I apologize for that. Once you're in there, you'll be able to see all of them. And then once you see even one of them, those same links are embedded. And so then that might be an easy way. If you have like folks in your organization you want to share it with.
Yeah, and just as we're applying, and there's a lot of information that you guys are sharing in the chat. And I just want to make sure I have that later so I can refer to it.
Yeah, so if you go to our website, I just dropped the link into, oh great, Melissa already has the link to today's PowerPoint already in there. If you go to the YDD main webpage, I want to say this properly. believe it is on the very front page. Abe, you could correct me. Scroll just a little bit and you'll see a link to join our email list, and I highly recommend everybody do that. And
I'm
then
on it.
so there's a link to our videos. And so
Okay.
then and so hopefully that will triangulate and that you would be able to share those links with folks in your organization to then have access to this video as well as all of the other videos that we've done in this work group series. Probably our info sessions will land in that same place. So when we have the RFAs, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and we have information sessions about each specific RFA where we go into like detail about who are the eligible youth for a re-engagement grant, that level of detail. We will have recordings of those as well, and they would be found in that same location of the video list. Abe, is that correct?
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Questions. And I realized with Sally posting the mission, vision, and equity statement, as well as those other pieces, when we do the reviewer training, and actually I would say a large percentage of all our presentations, that's what front-loading information that we provide in that work. I think in interest of time, we have actually not included the mission, vision, and equity statements and grounding of that in there, so that if you were a reviewer, you would see that as part of the training as well. It's
Got it.
incorporated into it.
So that leads it to my next question that you said, if you were a reviewer, to become a reviewer, do you just volunteer or are you randomly selected? Okay.
You volunteer, so there will be information that is shared out on that same link that Sally has been talking about, and actually it's in the next slide as well. And so we will share out information, basically an all call for folks that are interested in reviewing. And then from that point, once you've expressed your interest, typically that would be something that I will be coordinating with getting people organized and information. And then it's a random selection in terms of how you're assigned in that, if you don't have any conflict of interest within that RFA type.
Got it. I got that part. I just didn't, and I know you said volunteers during the time you were explaining it. I just didn't remember if you had said like how, like what the process is to volunteer, but okay.
Yep.
Thank you for explaining that to me. I appreciate it.
And we also just get emails from folks that hear these presentations that reach out. So actually, Melissa, if you want to pull up the next slide, would be great. I'm pointing at it, but it's my other screen. But one of the things that you will see in the community engagement that's coming up, so kind of addressing that question, is that there's two big kind of elements of community engagement prior to the published RFA materials and the release of the RFA. The first is next month. Thursday, December 12th is our YDC review and vote to approve the RFA process. As we said earlier, this presentation, if you watch that, it'll look very similar to this. It might be a little bit more detail in specific areas or questions off the council that would address that, but it'll be a vote in terms of the process. In terms of the specific question around request, in January and February, we will be launching what we call our YDO community conversations, and those are in-person and virtual events open to the public that will actually have, at that point, we'll have a link to say, hey, if you're interested in reviewing, this would be a QR code that you go in and sign up for. Again, we had over 90 reviewers that volunteered the last time, and so it's a pretty large process for us in terms of that coordination. So that will be really where we'll start launching that request for reviewers to come in and get more information along those lines of that work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So this next slide is just kind of talking about the new and next steps. And obviously we talked about the community engagement piece. In January and February, we're anticipating in-person events and just so that we can aid in conversation. In-person events are typically held solely as in-person, and then we do a kind of a virtual event towards the end of those community conversations. Community conversations is basically our term as an agency to say that we want to engage directly with the public, our grantees, community, as well as just other youth service providers in the area, as well as legislators and other folks that are interested in the work. And so we will be doing a tour. That'll be myself and Brian Detman, our director, as well as other grant managers. And we anticipate in-person events in the Medford Grants Pass area, in the Eugene area, Lincoln City, Newport area, and then the metro area, as well as in the Bend area. So 5-person in-person events is currently being considered, followed by a virtual event for all of the areas that you couldn't get to within that, or if weather impedes us, because yeah, January and February is obviously an interesting time for all of us to be traveling at times. But those will be great events to learn more about specifically the youth grants preview for the 25-27 biennium, but also learn about the YDO specific strategic plan that relates very closely to our grants and the model that you see within these grant requests. And then just learn more about the agency itself. So stay tuned to that for that information. We'd love to have folks come join. It's typically about a 2-hour event that will be hopefully pretty engaging and discussion based within that. Other next steps is the published RFA materials. So you've heard us reference these links. These are live links for you. It is published on the Youth Development Oregon website under the individual RFA type. There's drop-down menus on that side. So those will be updated as that continues to roll out. And that's where you'll access all of the RFA materials, but then also if there's an amendment or an adjustment to that process will be posted there. And then also information updates are sent out electronically through our Gov Delivery emails. And specifically, when you go in to register for that, you want to register for the Youth Development Council announcements. And that will be where all of these announcements are published and publicly sent out at regular links. You will get some emails about some other topics. You'll see it increase during those RFA releases. There's typically going to be several messages that come out. Our community conversations will also be shared out in that same group when you register for that. So I want to hit pause because there was a lot there. Make sure I didn't miss anything in terms around the website for Abe or Melissa in terms of how those communications go out. Did I miss anything?
Just a minor typo on announcements.
Oopsie. Oh yeah. M instead of an N. That's perfect. Yeah. That's what we get for finalizing that link this morning. Just kidding. Actually, no. I don't know. Melissa, do you have other things to talk about with how those Gov Delivery emails go out?
Not that I can think of right now. No, I don't think so. But you could always contact me if you're having any questions or issues trying to sign up for the list.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Well, so Paul mentioned that Gov Delivery has got all of the different ODE offices, different email lists in it. So you have to kind of scroll down and select youth development, council announcements. We just were talking about, adding one for funding announcements, but for now, the council announcements, if you sign up for that will always have funding announcements because our funding is generally tied to our council. You may also get some announcements of meetings like this and other sorts of public meetings, but we try not to send too much stuff out. So, but that is, even though there's not one that says funding announcements, it is the council information. There's another one related to our juvenile crime prevention work or our compliance monitoring work. Those are not where we're going to announce it. So I'm sorry it's complicated. I think it used to be simpler, but because we use the ODE system and that there are benefits to that, the downside is having to go in and make the selection. So there are instructions that you can also, there's a PDF I think Abe created, it's on the website. So when you go to the website, there's a link to sign up and there is a link to instructions on how to sign up, just in case it's a little bit sort of confusing how you get that done.
Absolutely. Which cord leads us? Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
I can
Melissa.
show that. I have that selection screen open because it's been a while since I've looked.
Please.
You want me to show it?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be great.
No, not at all. Let me slide it over here where we can see it. Once you've gone to our website and you've clicked through to, yes, I want to subscribe, it takes you to a list that looks like this. So you'll have a lot of options of Gov Delivery list to sign up for. And here we are at the bottom, Youth Development Council. And these are the two that you can sign up for. They're basically the same. I wonder if I'll see if I can pop this link in the chat.
Yeah, can you just go back one?
Yeah, let's see if it goes.
It looks like. So that's the slide that it kind of looks like you're going to get every email ODE has ever wanted to send you.
Yes.
Okay. Click submit, and then it gives you the drop down so that you can opt into the ones that you're interested in.
Yes. And I got to this link by going to just from our homepage, which is the Youth Development Division homepage right here. Subscribe. So couple clicks through, and you'll be receiving our messages, which I think Paul mentioned they're a little more frequent during the RFA stage, but we use it judiciously. I'll put it that way.
And I think that's a great lead into that last bullet, the RFA information sessions. That'll be one of those things. Once the RFA is released, you will see a lot of the information then kind of set back, because once the RFA is out in public, that's when we have to utilize a single point of contact, which will be through Oregon Department of Education procurement office, and it'll all be outlined in your RFA or in that paperwork that is published on our website. Once that happens, I can't stress enough the importance of attending the RFA information sessions. Those RFA information sessions, as well as the entire proposed or anticipated schedule of the process, is published in that RFA, and you'll have a link to the virtual webinar format of that. And that's where we really get into the details of each individual RFA. So Sally alluded to, like, re-engagement opportunity has eligible youth as well as specific eligible entities that can apply and the specific requirements of that grant. And during that session, that will be when it will be shared in greater detail than just the RFA. A little tip that I would suggest, though, is always read that RFA. I know it's a long document. At least scan it prior to those information sessions, because it'll help guide a lot of those questions within it. And then as part of that information session, or following those information sessions, both that video is published, but then also the official request for application Q&A follows that. And so the questions that are asked during that webinar session get published officially, and that all gets connected back to the website where all of the published RFA materials live throughout that process. And so you will less email or less Gov delivery emails from us, more visiting our website directly as you're going through that application process, for sure. But again, really can't stress enough to join us during those community conversations in January and February. We anticipate having more detail at our council meeting, and then obviously published through that Youth Development Council announcements. With that, there'll be a registration link so that we can make sure we have maybe enough coffee or little goodies for you to join us with that event. I think that's about it. So we're going to pause. We can probably go to the next slide. It's just a thank you slide.
Yeah, but it has our email addresses.
So it does have, that's important.
Yep.
Yeah. And I do want to just take a moment to, I know several people have joined us throughout multiple pieces of these work groups. I just can't thank people enough, both for joining us today, but also through these. I think we officially have done 10 work group sessions around these RFAs. So those folks that have joined us over the course of that, thank you for that work. It has been, I think, very informative and supportive of the process. And hopefully you find that as well. Sally, anything else to add?
I think that's it.
I think this is officially the longest session we've had, though. I think we're pretty close to the hour and a half we anticipated.
Yeah, quick shout out that Hillary Blackstone of
Hey, Hillary.
Higher Education Coordinating Commission opted in. Glad to have you here, Hillary.
Yeah, just happy to support you guys.
Thank you. And if anybody has questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Now is the time to be asking questions and gathering information before the RFA is officially released, and we are then unable to answer individual questions. Any questions at that point go through the single point of contact. Yeah, so glad. Thank you for those who joined us. We are so glad that you're here. We are so glad that you were able to get the information. Huge thank you to, I wrote down the name, but I already missed it, from BPI to be able to, he attended a couple of these sessions early on, and I love that this information is being shared. Don't hesitate to share this information with other maybe partner organizations or other folks that you work with so that they can be aware of this as well. We really value partnerships among youth serving organizations, and we really recognize that when youth present, they often have complex needs, and that those needs are often met by a variety of organizations. And so when those organizations are in conversation and working well, and we can be supportive of that, we are all the more glad for the impact that it has.
Well said, Sally. I appreciate that. So, all right. So,
I have one last question.
Of course.
You mentioned this is not official because it has to be approved by the council on December 12th. Is there a pretty good chance it will be approved as is, or I wasn't sure how the last process went. Do they trust the work group and say, yeah, or are there a lot of questions where some of these things might shift?
That's a great question. So, a lot of times in the past few events, council typically will have questions about the process, but they have typically approved it as we proposed. I think this transparent process has aided it. We've had a lot of council members join us across these 10 meetings, obviously not today, but throughout that time. So I do anticipate that process. One of the things, just as a good reminder, though, is once that a process is approved, the details of the RFA still have to go through the procurement process as well as legal sufficiency. So a lot of the real specific details may change based on what legal sufficiency can change. I guess I should say can change as we go through that legal sufficiency process around it. And so some of the things like the detail of the appeals process may be adjusted slightly. So do encourage folks to make sure that they read the RFA in terms of those really specific details.
And we are subject to legislative processes.
That too. That too. That's a big piece. Future ready, maybe. All right. Awesome. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining us throughout this process, and I think it's been a great tool for us as an agency, and hopefully you'll see that as these RFAs get published and released.
Thanks, everybody.